Welcome back to Get On Board, a podcast series from HKEX focusing on how corporates can achieve board diversity and put it into practice. I'm your host, Kelly Lee, from HKEX Policy and Secretariat Services team. Today, we are pleased to have Nik Allen to join us. Nik is an INED of HKEX and the former chairman of Link Asset Management. With over 15 years of experience serving on boards, he is a passionate DEI advocate and has championed women on boards in his capacity as an INED of various listed companies. Welcome, Nik.
Thank you, an honor to be here.
Okay, Nik, maybe we should start with from the very beginning, as in when you first received an offer to join a board. Would you take us through what will be your thought process when you first received the offer, and particularly what factors will you consider before making your decision?
Well, when I receive an inquiry to join a board, my immediate reaction is to say a big thank you, because they don't come along that often. And so the opportunity to join a board is a precious thing. I think that the first thing that's on my mind is, why have they asked me to join the board? And I really want to spend some time to understand what it is that they hope that I contribute, so that I can make sure that I feel I can contribute what they're asking for, and there isn't a mismatch between what their expectations are and what my expectations are.
So you have been have a lot of experience over the years on various boards and in different companies. So from your opinion and from your observation, how has the role of an INED evolved over the years? Could you perhaps share 3 key tips for INEDs on making the expected contribution to the board in order to properly discharge their duties?
For me, it's so important to have a high level of curiosity about the business that you might be being asked to join. For me, an industry is always like a hobby. I really want to learn as much as I can about it, and then I want to spend time to both understand the people and the business. The fundamental thing in joining a board is that you have to spend time to understand the strategy of the company, and learning it at a level that's a couple of levels down from, a one-page summary, because every time you're in a board meeting and every time you're asked to approve a transaction or a hire or make any decision, you have to do it from the backdrop of understanding strategy. And if you haven't understood strategy, all of those decisions become quite challenging sometimes. So curiosity, treat it as a hobby, and spend time understanding the key aspects of the business.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on your point about understanding the business, understanding the strategy. So we often heard INEDs saying that, we're not involved in the day-to-day management. So in order for them to have a good grasp of the company situation, how would you think, what can they do to build a good working relationship with other directors as well as the management?
Sometimes you're asked to join a board where you might find it very difficult to understand the business, because some businesses are very complex. So you have to have an understanding. Yes, could I, if I spent time, really get underneath a little bit of the skin of this company? So how do you go about that? I'm a firm believer in saying that, yes, I want you to read your papers, and yes, I want you to turn up, but that for me is 50% or less of what a good INED does. And what's so important is what you do around the board meetings. And that is making sure that you ask the chairman what his expectations are of you, that you have the ability to speak to the managing director or the CEO, and that you do start to develop relationships. And for me, it's a little bit of a test of management, because at the end of the day, you have to trust management. You're not running the business. You have to trust them. You're constantly assessing that level of trust, reconfirming it with every interaction that you have. Very important to be interested, as I say, as a hobby. So what is the industry? What industry groups or presentations are there that enable you to go out and understand better what is going on in your company? So just because you're not managing the company doesn't mean you can't understand the strategy to a depth. And you do need to be constantly reinforcing your view about trust with a whole range of interactions in order to be able to to perform your role competently.
You mentioned, okay, sometimes when you got an offer, the company may be involved in the business which you are not that familiar with. Because sometimes we heard companies, when they go out and identify INEDs, they always wanted to look for somebody who has that industry-specific knowledge. So would you see that as a challenge for INEDs when you, like an individuals, when you accept an offer, or when you consider, or even for the companies, for them to identify INEDs? Is it really a must for them to have an industry-specific knowledge?
Very good question. I think the point I was trying to make before was not do I understand the business, but am I capable of understanding the businesses? Because some businesses, I say, are complex. Now, Hong Kong, I would say, doesn't have a lot of those businesses, and therefore the expectation is that you would be able, spending time, to understand and get a grasp of the businesses. So you asked about industry expertise. So where do I get my deep industry expertise from? And for me, that is executives who have had executive roles in that industry. But then the other half of the other side of the coin is the governance part. And so INEDs very much provide the governance part. I see a good board as a balance between industry expertise and governance expertise, with those INEDs who aren't industry deep, spending the time that they can to understand it, but bringing their knowledge, whether it is in remuneration practices, whether it is a financial or risk expertise, on the audit committee. So, my background is PwC, so I've never been a director of an accounting firm. So all of the boards I've joined, I don't have deep industry expertise. And frankly, even boards of companies where I, in my role at PwC, spent a lot of time consulting with clients, I never got as deep as an audit partner than I have once I've taken on a board role and started to talk about things, because you move away from the balance sheet, you move away from the P&L, you talk about a whole lot of other issues in the business. So I don't feel people should shy away from opportunities. Industry expertise is part of it, but not the whole piece.
Yeah, I think especially one point you mentioned about is the balance. The board as a whole should have the balance of the necessary knowledge, industry experience in order to help the whole board to function effectively. And the requirements, for example, on the board performance review, the board skill matrix, as well as some mandatory directors training, are all the focuses of our latest corporate governance consultation. So from your views, how do you see these measures or the proposals are contributing to a positive change in the board landscape?
One of my conclusions on my INED journey, and also having chaired a public company, is that I think it's important for INEDs to have some exposure externally to stakeholders. I feel that traditional models of boards, if you're sitting as an INED, you almost never become face-to-face with people whose decisions you're affecting. Okay, P&L calls, very black and white, but community calls, etc., etc. So I feel it's very important that boards are able to get INEDs exposed to stakeholders. And so that the measures that you referred to, I feel, are all important elements of shining a light upon how INEDs work, what questions they've asked, etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you. It's very encouraging to hear that. Maybe we can then turn to diversity, another very important topic that you're paying a lot of attention to, and also in the market. And as part of our efforts to end single gender board by the end of this year, we have already created hundreds of new board seats and for female executives on our market. Perhaps any tips for female board directors who are also first time joining the board? How can they, what should they prepare for their appointment? And I think most importantly, how do they ensure that their voice is being heard, especially where they may be the underrepresented gender on the board?
Yeah, a really important subject. Two things. One is that executives sometimes are more challenged about letting management get on with the business as opposed to doing some of it themselves. Mm-hmm. So if you are in that role where perhaps you're working full-time, but you have an enlightened employer that is giving you access to a board, which Exchange does and other boards do, then getting that balance right between what you do as an executive and what you do as a non-executive is really quite important. I and maybe I'm lucky because I've been on boards for quite some time. So if I'm quiet at a board meeting, it's not too much of an issue. So my philosophy very much is that you're almost kind of providing some guardrails sometimes for management. And if they are roaring along the racetrack in the middle of the rails, then there's not very much for you to say. And the importance of what you say is when you feel that they have moved a little bit to one side. So just getting that balance between feeling, oh, I've got to say something because I'm new and people will expect me to say something. Try and make sure that you've got something to say that is relevant.
So we have talked about how what individuals can do. Maybe we can consider the other side of the coin, like the boards in Hong Kong that are about to welcome their first female director. So in your opinion, how can these boards what can they do to ease this transaction?
Yeah, I feel that, the way you start is often quite important. So yes, I think people will have induction sessions and they get ever longer and ever more detailed and and those are important. But I also feel that part of the induction is starting the process of a new INED developing a network that's not just around the board. So if you have an area of expertise, whether it's in government or industry, that you are introduced to people within MCO, whatever, that you can talk to and say, hey, I understand this, what are you doing there? And those start that network. Again, I'm a big believer in triangulation, which is anytime somebody gives me some data, if I'm in a meeting and it's you giving me data, then we're not triangulating. I'd rather have been able to ask somebody else or had a view, and very often those views are nuanced differently, and it really helps you understand data when it's presented to you. Because there's a natural inclination, genuinely, it's very hard to fight, to present positive views at board meetings. Everything's looking good, that's not such a big issue. And as a board member, how do you get yourself in a position where you can say, well, actually, I think there is a bit more to that. And part of that is your expertise, but part of it is because you've been able to talk to people. So please, new boards, encourage the new INEDs to have that ability. And it's a sign of a confident CEO, and the CEOs I deal with. Sure, go and talk to anybody you like, I don't mind. Rather than let me know who you're talking to, I want to make sure. So that is a sign of confidence, is a sign of trust. So that's an important test for me.
So at the end of the day is all about the relationship, the trust building, the confidence level.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Many thanks to Nick for joining us for this episode and for sharing your thoughts on board diversity. Issuers and anyone interested in learning more about diversity and inclusion can check out the Board Diversity Hub recently launched by HKEX. Please visit our website at hkex.com.hk for more details. Thank you for listening to the 4th episode of Get On Board.